Hi, everyone. On a summer's afternoon in 2020, 2 months after we started working together, my career coach, Paula, called me up in order to call me out on my driving habits. Now, can you think of any reason why I wouldn't be considered the most excellent of drivers? Me? But actually, the vehicle was a figurative one. As Paula had explained to me when we first started working together, the car represented our collective journey that we would work together in tandem to ensure that I would successfully achieve my entrepreneurial and financial growth goals. As she told me, I would be in the driver's seat and I would determine the general route, the speed at which we traveled, the playlist that we would jam to, decide whether or not, maybe the sunroof was open or maybe whether we wound the windows all the way up and had the AC on blast. And Paula had the map. And Paula could direct me to alternate routes. She knew where the shortcuts were, and she knew where all the off-ramps were to resources that I possibly needed and could access. But on this particular afternoon, Paula's intent was on confronting me with several missed sessions and some other sessions that I had shown up late to. And so I had Paula on speaker while I sat at my desk, and I listened to her voice telling me that she wasn't particularly interested in being a passenger in my vehicle, not how I was currently operating it. And she told me that she didn't feel like I was respecting her time or even my commitment to myself. Inwardly, I just groaned, oh my God, we're in the pandemic. Everything is off the rails, And so Paula went on and she told me that while she understood that we are all late sometimes, that life happens, that how a person shows up in one aspect is most likely how they show up in all aspects. I was like, whoa, what the hell? What's she talking about? I envisioned that Paula was going to be riding shotgun, and she was coming across as that irritating backseat driver. This is not what I wanted to hear. But I remained silent, and I thought to myself, I think I'm actually doing pretty good. My husband and I are working together. We're holding down the fort. We're not at each other's throats. The kids are good. I'm volunteering at multiple organizations still online. And I'm trying to grow my business in a time when a lot of businesses are folding. I don't need this right now. But I sit there listening to Paula's voice as she continues, and she says, if you are willing to, change up your habits and make the environment more comfortable and respectful for the two of us, I'd be willing to continue to stay in the car along for the journey. That is, if you want to as well. And the first thing I thought was, how the hell can I just throw her out of the car? But I didn't say that. Through very tight lips, I said, I'll get back to you on that. I need to think about it. And so Paula said, okay, the ball's in your court. And she ended the call, and I thought we were talking about driving and, those habits, and now it's about basketball? And I thought about what she had said, and I forgot to mention that she had repeated it another time, but in a different way. She says, how you do one thing is how you do everything. And so I was mimicking in my head, how you do one thing is how you do everything. And I thought, what the heck is this? I've come a long way in my life on my own. I've been through a lot of adversities. And that conversation with Paula was just really taking me back to some real trauma drama that didn't have anything to do with what we're talking about, but still, it just automatically put me on the defensive. As a person with a disability, I'd spent a lifetime pushing back on other people's negative perspectives, low expectations, not thinking that I had capacity, and even judgments on, how I got things done and the quality of those things that I got done. So I was really triggered. And for the rest of the day, I just thought, you know what, I'm done with this. But the next day, I woke up, and Paula's words were still ricocheting through my brain. And so I kind of really held it and rolled it back and forth, considering how you do one thing is how you do everything. My emotions had, come down a bit from the day before, and as was my habit, I would go over past conversations and really try to go deeper. And so I thought about it. And, I accepted the fact that when I was really passionate about something, I put pedal to the metal. I was full force on it. I wasn't like a Sunday driver type of style. And I recognized that with that type of driving habit, that sometimes I, most likely blew past some other things that were also important. And when I thought about it, I recognized that there were certain things like, doctor's appointments and visits that I wasn't scheduling, that I was way behind on certain checkups because I was really focused on other things I was doing. There were dreams of things that I wanted to do with the kids that somehow never materialized, never came to fruition because I was putting them to the side because I was focusing on something else. And of course, there was always those handful of chores around the house that just never got done. And I recognized that while I was really achieving that checkered flag in a lot of areas, that there were other areas that I was skimming over and that things were getting dropped. And I decided to ponder on it a little bit more. And once again, I rolled those words around through my mind. How you do one thing is how you do everything. And I thought about the automatic response that I had had to her words and how that had really triggered me and brought me back to the past, to some unpleasant moments. And I thought about those fears that I still carried around being judged, being measured, and found wanting, and how I still seemed to be carrying these trauma responses that just automatically came out. And I really didn't want to admit it, but my spirit was restless with the weight of the truth of it. That I think Paula, maybe she was right. Maybe I could be doing something more. And was I really stretching myself in all the needed directions to reach my full potential? And then I started thinking about what it would cost me to stay in that car. And I thought what it meant would be that I would have to sit in discomfort, that I would have to take a good long look in the mirror and come face to face with both my fears and my flaws. That I would have to be willing to both celebrate my wins and my achievements, but be willing to acknowledge the areas where I still needed to grow some more. And it can be really uncomfortable to take a look at the parts of our character that don't match up to who we think we are and who we want to be and the values that we say we hold and that we carry. But when we can pivot and dive deep into that dark abyss, there's no way that you can come out any other way but transformed, and transformed for the better. And so I decided that I was going to stay in that car. And I was going to continue on that journey with Paula by my side. And we did. And she was one of my biggest cheerleaders, and she also held me accountable to who I said I was, who I said I wanted to be, and what I said I wanted to accomplish, and what that needed in order for me to actually reach there. And with Paula by my side and that willingness to embrace vulnerability and fear and to just dive into that deep, I managed to accomplish by the end of our time together the biggest and most lucrative contract that I had to that date that really completely transformed my family's economic situation. And one thing that I can say for all of us is that in order to be effectively seated in the driver's seat of our life and to be able to create the life of our dreams, that requires accountability, and it requires us to be willing to embrace vulnerability. And through that, we can build trusting relationships, and we can forge a path to our greatest desires. And so I want to encourage you all that pivoting can be some of the best decisions that we make in life. And that's it for me, folks. Thank you.